Welcome into this week's edition of AWA Unleashed. We are the self-proclaimed preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to the American Wrestling Association and telling the stories of the AWA. As you can see on the screen, if you are watching, my name is Chris Tubbs. This is my part of the gig. But let's bring in the other two fellas, as we like to call him, Polish Joe and Mick Karch. And Joe, I'm digging the swag this week. I'm digging the swag.
Well, had to plunk it down. Even got, now I know what my name is.
Wow.
Good. Well, yeah, you're giving Karch residuals there because I think Karch gets a portion of that merchandise money. So I think you're making more money right now from that than you ever did with Vern.
Oh, there's no doubt. I made more money now than I with Vern. Are you kidding me? What? 4 cents, and he took half of that back for taxes and his porcelana cream and everything else. So I did real well with him.
4 cents? That's the only time you ever had any sense.
Well, yeah, good point there.
Anyway, guys, we've got something a little bit different today. Before we get into the special guest, I do want to thank 7th Avenue Pizza. You can see the logo on the upper right-hand corner. We're getting into the part of the year, guys and gals, where it's getting a little bit warmer. Maybe, you want yourself some pizza, 7th Avenue Pizza. Go check it out. A lot of the local retailers up in the Twin Cities here, the, state of Minnesota, 7thavenuepizza.com. If for some reason you're having an issue, you can't find it, hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, whatever you use in terms of your social media platform. And, of course, you can see the sweatshirt by Polish Joe. I want to thank Soda Stick as well because they are the official clothing retailer, the clothing provider of us here at AWA Unleashed. And we've got the T-shirts, we've got the sweatshirts, the hoodies, everything. Again, if you see it other places, it's not legit. Don't get the bootleg stuff because they might screw up the spelling of AWA. It might be, WAW, which it's not WA, okay? It's AWA Unleashed, okay? So just remember that. Okay. That being said, Mick, I'm going to hand it over to you. Oh, Mackenzie, yay!
Off the top rope.
There she goes.
Ring the bell. That's a disqualification.
Fines and suspension.
All right. Well, we've got something coming up right now here, guys. It's a little bit unique to what we're doing, but I feel like this is one that people are really, really going to enjoy. I've been looking forward to this, guys, for a long time. I believe the correct term is mark out, but I'm going to let you take it here, Mick, and I'm going to get my thoughts together because I'm like super duper excited.
All right. Well, the gentleman that I'm going to introduce right now, I have known for a long time, at least 30 years or better. When you talk about the modern era of professional wrestling and the guys that are super talented and can do everything and have done everything in the business, no matter what was tossed his way, he did it, and he did it in style. And I can't say enough good things about this guy. Talk about your consummate professional. And I don't know what name we're going to call him, as the show goes on, any number of names. But the big deal, in my estimation, my friend, Barry Darsow. And Mick, there he is.
Mick, well, thank you. I don't know about that gentleman deal, though, but I appreciate that. Yeah, we have been friends for a long time.
Long time, and Barry, it is such a kick to have you here. And I know a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads and they're going to say, "Well, wait a minute, you're an AWA Unleashed podcast. We went through our old programs and we don't see Barry on any of the AWA shows." But we'll get into that as time goes on. In the meantime, just to have you on the show is such a kick. I know that you are incredibly busy. We talked about that before you got on the air. You're still over, as they say in the business, and you're busy. You're on the road all the time.
Yeah, I am. I'm very thankful that people still want to see me out there. That's half the thing in this business is to make some money and everything. And now it seems like you make more money now than you did 20, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty nice. And thanks for having me on the show too.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And as I said, for those who are not familiar, the 2 or 3 of you out there who, probably started watching wrestling last week, Barry is, again, I don't mean to use the hyperbole, Barry, but in so many ways, you've been handed so many roles in the business, and you have aced every one of them. And we're going to talk extensively about that, but, talk about your background a little bit in Minnesota. So, Chris, kick it off.
All right. And I told you guys this before the show started. Barry was so over with me when, you can see he's got his, Demolition Smash, one of the personas. But he was so over with me when I was a kid that my cousin Rob and I dressed up as Demolition Axe and Smash when we were kids. So it is completely an honor here. And I know there's a lot of stuff to get to. But first of all, Barry, I mean, one of the reasons why I feel like this podcast resonates, and one of the reasons that we wanted to get you on, is because of your connection to maybe the Mecca of pro wrestling here in the Twin Cities. I mean, that's Robbinsdale. You look at the name of guys that came from Robbinsdale, and I mean, you literally could have a top-notch promotion just with the people from that little region of the Twin Cities. Did you ever want to become a wrestler? I mean, was that ever something that was on your radar when you were a kid, or, growing up with these guys?
Well, at first, no, but, my brother and myself, we used to watch wrestling Sunday afternoon after church all the time. And, we always thought, God, it'd be great to be a wrestler, but there's no way that the thought would ever, really happen. But after getting a little older, I got to know Curt Hennig very well. And, his dad became a big Larry the Axe Hennig fan. And then, with Curt being a friend and his friends and everything, that's kind of how I had the opportunity to get in the business. Eddie Sharkey, who was a bartender down at Grandma B's, he kind of, got us all started. And when he was bartending, it was the Road Warriors, Rick Rude, myself, and then with Curt Hennig, we ended up getting Eddie Sharkey's camp going, and that's how we all got in the business. So really, it was kind of because of Curt and Larry is what got us all really interested in it.
So, Barry, I got to ask you, this is Polish Joe, by the way, Barry. The names that came out of Robbinsdale, it's like the Mecca of professional wrestling. It's like, what was in the water? Or maybe it was the beer when you were in high school, but what the hell was it? What was it about Robbinsdale? And then just give me a little bit about...
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was because of Curt. We all became Larry the Axe Hennig fans, and we all watched the AWA. And I think it was, kind of everybody's dream was to get into wrestling, but you knew it was never going to happen. But then when it finally did happen, all of us that were friends got in. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why, Vern didn't want to hire me, and he didn't want to hire a few other guys, because I think he was scared that the whole Robbinsdale would take over the whole territory.
Sure.
And I really believe that. And, I talked to Vern a few times about working in the territory, and he always says, well, one day, it was never like, well, come on in. And I know he could have used me, but, that's why I just kind of stayed away. And then I never called him after that.
Barry, that kind of springboards me into the next question. You kind of touched on a few things there, because I look at that Robbinsdale roster from back in the day, and my God, you talk about guys that made it in the business. So everybody looks at that list, and they'll see Curt Hennig, and they'll see Scott Simpson, they'll see Jesse Ventura, whatever. Well, Jesse was kind of on the fringe there, but Curt Hennig and Larry. And my question was always that, why, of all people, wasn't Barry Darsow in the AWA? Because it seemed to me that was absolutely the perfect fit, and still to this day, you know, when I look back on those 1980s AWA days, man, you would have just absolutely blended right in. So now, you know, your theory about Vern is very interesting.
Yeah. I always wanted to go back home, but all the territories that I was in wrestling, I did really well. So I really wasn't pushing it to get back. You know, when I was in Mid-South with Bill Watts, that's where I really learned how to wrestle. And that territory was fantastic. And then from there, I went to Florida Championship Wrestling. You know, you couldn't beat that. It was like, why would I want to go to work for Vern? I'm making money in all these other places.
Sure.
And then when I went to Crockett's territory, so, you know, every once in a while, Vern's territory would call, and Ivan and myself, we'd go work for Vern, but through Crockett.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you can remember the big Kaminsky Park.
Sure. Yeah.
One. Well, that was my dream match. You know, growing up watching the Baron, the Krusher, and the Bruiser, and all of a sudden here I'm in the ring with these guys. I mean, it was unbelievable. Kaminsky Park.
Yeah.
So I did work for Vern every once in a while, but not in the territory, and it was kind of strange.
It's really interesting. And then, you know, kind of piggybacking off of that, Rick Rude, another guy, you know, Scott Simpson, Nikita Koloff, another guy that didn't work for Vern. What was going on there? What was their reasoning behind that?
See, I think it was Vern really didn't want us in the territory. There's too many people from Minnesota, and that would have hurt him.
Okay.
Because you know, when you get 10 guys that are all friends, you could come in and take over that territory pretty easy.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the character of guys that we were with, you know, the Road Warriors, John Nord, you know, I mean, pretty strong people, we could have taken over that territory and said, hey, Vern, go take a hike.
Well, in hindsight, that probably would have been a better conclusion than what did happen with the AWA.
Yeah.
You had a guy from New York come in and take it over, basically,
Yeah.
by forcing Vern out of the business.
Right.
Yeah, just sad.
So with you, Barry, I mean, we've seen that, you know, everything that you've done. I mean, you were, you know, people got behind you when you were a good guy, fan favorite, the baby face, as they say. But I feel like what made you really good was you were such a believable villain. And to me, I feel like, you know, that is where it seemed like just, you know, I looked at you and you were so believable. Did you feel like you were better in either one of those roles?
Yeah, you know, I appreciate you saying that. I really took pride into my characters that I had, and the worst character I ever had was Barry Darsow. I couldn't be Barry Darsow. If I was a character, if I was Krusher Kruschev, I really felt like I was that guy that hated America and I loved Russians, you know. So that was me. When I was Smash, I was really the guy that I'm going to beat people up. I don't care about anybody. You know, when I was the Repo Man stealing cars, I really wanted to steal cars. That's how I got into my characters. And I think that's what made me a heel, you know, the way the heel that I wanted to be is because I really became those characters.
Was there one that you enjoyed more than the other, or was there one that you looked at and you're like, I don't really know if this fits, you know, my personality?
You know, when I was Demolition Smash, that was my favorite character. But when I was the Blacktop Bully,
I love
that one I could have went a long ways with, and they cut that short. But that was my favorite gimmick out of all of them. And the way they had it all set up, you know, in the NWA, the way I was in jail, the whole program was fantastic. But it was just at a real bad time because it was a change in the guards. It was, you know, Ric Flair was the booker, and then that's when all of a sudden, you know, Eric Bischoff is in there and all these other things. There's so many changes that the Blacktop Bully just kind of went away. And you know, when I had that match with Dustin Rhodes in the truck and got fired, that was just kind of a way to get rid of that character. And I really hated that because it was a fun character. You know, I could have wrestled Hulk back then, being the Blacktop Bully, if they would have pushed that.
Yeah,
So
I wanted to kind of follow up with it. Like, there's been a lot of controversy about that, and I believe that was Uncensored '94.
Right.
What I mean, was there a specific rule like going into that, like you couldn't do certain things? Is that what I'm hearing? Because I mean, I see this from the outside, and yeah, I was just kind of puzzled as to. It was really good. It was entertaining, and then it was like nothing went. It didn't go anywhere.
Right. I mean, it was a huge match that they set up because, they had helicopters, they had cameras on cars. I mean, it was a huge thing. And Mike Graham was our booker, telling us what to do, and he told us exactly what to do, and we did it. And they ended up cutting out a lot of the match because there was a lot of blood. There was a lot of. I mean, it was one of the best matches that I've ever been in. And when Dustin and I were all done with it, we both looked at each other and went, "Holy shit, was that unbelievable!" And the next day, I got home. I got a phone call from Eric Bischoff, and he says, "Barry, hell of a match." He says, "But I got some good news and bad news." And I said, "Well, Eric, what?" He says, well, "What do you want first?" I says, "Well, give me the bad news." He says, "You're fired." I said, "I'm fired? Just got through saying I had the greatest match ever." And he says, "Yeah, I'm really sorry, but you couldn't have any blood on TV."
Oh.
And I said, well, half of it was the barbed wire that's in there. It really happened. And I said, we were told to do everything in there that we're supposed to. And he says, well, with the CNN towers, they didn't want any blood on TV and all this stuff and everything. So he said, the good news is I'm going to hire you back. I promise you, but just please go away easy. And I was friends with Eric, and I said, yeah, I'll do that. I'm fired. So they fired Dustin and Mike Graham. And I says, well, what about the camera crew? What about everybody? Why don't you fire everybody then? Why just fire us? And it just ended up being that way. But it was really a terrible way to end that part of my career there. But then he hired me back, and I was on a nice contract, and I hardly worked. And I felt terrible by not working because all my life I've always been part of it. And now I'm getting paid to go to TV, not even be on TV. And I felt so guilty. That was kind of the end of my whole wrestling was after that. I didn't even want to be in the business anymore. It was like I'm getting something for free now. You know what I mean?
What's interesting about that, Barry, is that I know that there were guys, and that was the story about the NWA and, WCW back then, that a lot of guys were collecting that paycheck.
Yep.
And, not working for it. But a lot of them, on the other hand, were just fine, collecting, the gravy, so
Right.
to hear you say you felt bad about not working, that's really something.
Well, it's because I really loved wrestling.
Yeah.
That was my life. Every time I got in the ring, I worked, 100% of what I could do, and sometimes maybe it didn't look that way to some people, but to me, I was working so hard to have the best match that I could have with the person I was with. And it was really hard for me to not do that. And I look back now and I go, oh, what an idiot. I should have took the money and I would have been healthy. I wouldn't have a new knee and I'd have a good back. And, but, that's just not the way my thought process was.
So, Barry, I want to ask you about Demolition. In particular, when Demolition first appeared, or let me actually back up before you actually came on as Demolition. When you were approached about being Demolition, I mean, let's face facts. It was a knockoff of the Road Warriors, okay? And you were friends with Animal and Hawk. So give me a little bit about what your thought process was about debuting Demolition, having the face paint and the spikes and so forth, and paying the ultimate compliment. And by the way, I do have to say that Demolition certainly pulled it off very, very successfully. So I'm not taking anything away, but just in the beginning, what was your thought process?
So why do you say a knockoff?
Well, it's maybe not a knockoff, but modeled after.
And why do you say modeled after?
Well, as a fan at the time, you had the face paint similar to Animal and Hawk.
And other people had that too.
Oh, very, very true.
Okay, and other people had spikes too, right?
Very true, but they weren't.
So why do you say that?
Well, I say
is that because what people out there say? Oh, it's a knockoff of them?
No, not at all. A knockoff is
so they probably.
The wrong word.
I'm sure they copied us on a lot of stuff. A lot of the moves we did, they did. Why did they copy us? Why were they knockoffs of us?
Oh, no doubt. I like I said, I'm giving Demolition its full credit as a fan.
Yeah, but you're not. You're calling us knockoffs.
I know, and
we were another team that did something out there that worked for the WWE, and then somebody came out and said, "Oh, they're knockoffs of the Road Warriors." Well, that's the shits. That ain't true.
And I will give you that.
Because we went on our own. We worked different than them. We did things different than them. Everything we did was different than the Road Warriors. So how could we be knockoffs? It's just like if you said, "Oh, Hulk Hogan did a leg drop on somebody." Well, somebody else did a leg drop. They're all copycats of Hulk Hogan now.
And I love your answer, because it was you. It's not even defending, but you explained the whole thing, and I get it. I'm just going on to at the time that's what the fans were talking about.
But at the time they didn't say that. They said it at the time. They didn't say that. They said it way later.
Oh, okay.
So because I never even heard that. I never even thought about it when I was getting the job. That was just not even in my process of my thought. When I ended up leaving Crockett's territory, Dave Hebner and Earl Hebner and Ricky Steamboat, they called Vince McMahon for me, and they said, "Hey, there's a guy here that you need to talk to." And Vince McMahon knew who I was from TV, Krusher Kruschev. Mm-hmm. So Vince called me up and he said, "Hey, Barry," he says, "I'd like you to come up. I got a little job for you. How would you like to work for me?" I said, "Shoot, yeah." Because that was the pinnacle of your whole career, was going up to New York. Mm-hmm. And I'm like 24, 25 years old. I'm the youngest guy in the territory there.
Wow.
So I get up there and I sign a non-disclosure, and Vince says, "I got a character that we've been talking about for a long time, and we'd really like you to be it. And it all depends upon who your partner, if he is on board with you being his partner." And I said, "Okay." So he pulled out all these different pictures, some with spikes, some without spikes, some with masks, some with, all different pages, all full color pictures. I said, "Vince, I'm on board for whatever you want." I said, I'll make it happen." So he says, "Okay, well, when do you want to start?" I said, "I need about 3 or 4 months off. I've been on the road for 4 years, and I hurt, and I need to get my mind right and train." He says, "Okay, why don't we do this? I'll sign you to a contract right now, and why don't we put you on TV in Tampa, Florida in 4 months?" I said, "Perfect." So he says, "Now I got to get a hold of Bill Eadie. You know Bill Eadie?" And I said, "Yeah, I've met Bill before." He says, "If he's all right with your partner, he says, we're going to start this thing." So I ended up talking to Bill quite a few times, and we figured out, what we were going to do, and never even dawned on me that this was anything like what the Road Warriors were. It's like, no, this is Barry Darsow and Bill Eadie, and we got a character thing going on. So the first TV we were at, the people were looking at us like, "What the heck is this?" Because when it first started out, if it was Randy Cawley, he was one of the Moondogs, and all the people were yelling, "Moondog, Moondog." Well, they didn't really know who I was in New York. being Krusher Kruschev. So it just ended up working out perfect where, you know, they didn't know who we are and we just started kicking ass. And that's kind of how the whole thing got started. And it took probably about 4 or 5 months to really start getting over, because at that time it was the best tag teams in wrestling. We're all up there.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, and you got to kind of fight for your life a little bit with these guys. These guys all know what they're doing, and everybody wants to get over, and you got to work with people and still get over on them. So it was a tough road. Thank God Bill Eadie was my partner, and he helped me really figure out what the business was about. Because by the time I got up there, I thought I was the greatest wrestler of all time. But little do you know, you know nothing. In each one of these territories, you learn so much more. And it was unbelievable experience.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Bill, like, or Barry, sorry, we're talking about Bill. Just kind of the follow-up to that it seemed like the business at that point, you know, looking back on it, I don't think we realized how much it was changing, but you do have a lot of these different teams and, you know, individuals that are coming from different promotions and different territories. And you talk about learning, you know, from people that are coming all over and they're converging in one area. Did you get the sense that the business itself was almost like going to be flipped on its head? Like everything was going to be changing from what it was, because you do have a convergence of so many different people that were, you know, going to New York?
Well, back then, I didn't. The business wasn't changing. It was, you know, the way you worked. You know, you got better.
Okay.
You know, when I was in Mid-South with Bill Watts learning, you know, Nikolai Volkov taught me how to do a lot of stuff, and George Weingroff, and you know, Terry Taylor, you know, these guys. And then when I got to Florida, you know, then it was Michael Hayes and, you know, a whole different group of people. But when I got to Crockett's territory, Ivan Koloff, he really taught me how to wrestle. And with Nikita and him and myself, I learned so much working with, you know, other top guys, the Rock and Roll Express, you know, Dusty and Flair, you know. So I thought that I knew it all. But then when you get up to New York, and then all of a sudden you got all these other different ways that people work. You know, it's all the same, but you just get better and you learn your craft better. Now, after being in the WWF for so long, now things started changing at the end, you know, where, you know, there's no more kayfabe and it's all the entertainment business. You know, now all of a sudden, instead of telling the story, we want more excitement on the TV match, you know, and then that's when it all kind of started, when, you know, the 15-minute TV match went to 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And you had to have a good match. You know, it's nonstop, no story. And then pretty soon they wanted more high flying. And then, you know, and so that's how it's changed over the years to now, you know. But I don't know if you saw any WrestleMania, but some of them, you know, like Charlotte Flair's match, they took their time in a lot of the places on that match. So now it's getting back to where they got to tell the story again, because people aren't watching that little 5-minute match anymore. It's not, there's no excitement to it.
You know, Barry, it's interesting that Nick Bockwinkel, when he went to WWF as an agent in 1987, had a conversation with Nick about, you know, the differences between the WWF and the AWA, which was still around at the time, and NWA. And we talked about that very thing, you know, the nature of the matches changing, especially on television. And Nick said it's because of the audience. He said the audience now in this day and age, they want crash TV. They don't want anything, you know, that's spread out over even an extra 5-6 minutes. They want boom, 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 boom. What do you think about that theory?
You know, you're exactly right. And Mick, you've been around so long. You've talked to so many top guys, and you know, I look at what your career is too, and I love it because you've met everybody in this business.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, serious. But it's exactly right. The crowds change, and a different crowd watches AEW than watches the WWF.
Mhm.
And just like back when, the Road Warriors were in the NWA and I was in the WWE, it was two different crowds. And each match, it's kind of hard to explain, but as the years go by, the new kids come up and they're kind of bored with watching something slow. They need to see things fast. But then the parents still want to see the story. So it's kind of gives it mixed messages where you have to have all the stuff on the TV for everybody because the parents bring the kids to the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's how I've always seen it. So you have to do things for both of them. And when you tell that story, the story might be just faster than it used to be. And that was the key, is to figure out how to do that.
That's really interesting. And to that point, Barry, do you think, I mean, in my estimation, in this day and age, there's such a blurring of the heels and the baby faces. 9 times out of 10, the baby faces might be getting booed in an arena or something. Do you think the art of telling the story is lost on today's kids because they only have, if they make it in WWE, they got 5 minutes to tell the story on television. So, back in the day, the feud was on and on and on, and your matches were half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. Is the art of telling the story gone?
The art is gone that way, but they have another way to get you as a heel, and that's the commentators, and they make the people boo. They tell the people what's going on. Right away the commentators say, this guy's a bad guy. Well, then the people go, well, he's a bad guy. Yeah. So they tell it faster now than the wrestler telling the story. I mean, when they get a script at the beginning of the match that tells them exactly what they got to do and what they got to say, each person loses who they really are.
God, yes.
Because they're the people that the office wants them to be, not the person that they want to be. And then they have to grow into that person. Where, like when I was telling you, when I became the Repo Man, I really wanted to steal cars. Mm-hmm. That was my character. That was me. It wasn't the office telling me to do that. So you could work differently because that's how you wanted to work. But eventually all these guys are so good now that they do get in the character. I mean, these guys wrestling now, they're doing things that I can't believe they're even doing. And their careers ain't going to last very long because of it either. But, phenomenal wrestlers. And they're making millions of dollars now, too.
It's interesting that you say that the careers are not going to last that long. I mean, and obviously a lot of that has to do with the high flying and, going through 6-7 tables and jumping from balconies and so on and so forth. Far cry from back in the 80s where maybe you had one scaffold match a year, right. That kind of thing. But so given all that, and looking back on your 1980s days as opposed to now, if the script was flipped a little bit, you fast forward 30 years, would you get into the wrestling? Would you have had the same desire to get into wrestling that you did back then? And is today's style conducive to something that you would have enjoyed?
I would have still wanted to be in wrestling. It's because it's wrestling, but I would have had to change everything. I would have had to change my way of training, my way of, my dieting. I have to, be a completely different person than I was. You know what I mean? Because you're working different. The one thing Axe and Smash always did, we took pride in never blowing up. When we were in the ring, we could wrestle anybody. We could wrestle for an hour. It didn't matter who it was. We wouldn't get tired. But there's other times when we didn't train like that, where I have other characters where I couldn't go an hour or a half hour. You know what I mean? you're out drinking beer the night before and for a week and eating pizza, and it's like, but that's not what it was all about. When you knew you had to go against guys where you had hour Broadways, and all of a sudden you're dieting, you're watching what you're eating, you're training different, and but these guys now are so lean. They're a big guy now. The average guy is 230 pounds. That's the big guy.
Right.
I mean, the lightest I've ever been was 265, I think, in first grade. I mean, hey,
So, Barry, I'm going to stick with the 80s since we're sort of in that period.
All right.
I was doing Vern's TV at the time. And up until about 1987, Vern still had some success.
Yeah.
But I mean, shit, in 87, I was 22 years old myself. I could see that what the AWA was in 87 wasn't what it was when I was watching it in high school in the early 80s, when Hogan came in and the Road Warriors and so forth. What was the talk in the locker room at NWA, WCW, whatever you want to call it? What was the talk in the locker room about the AWA? And then I'll expand on that a little bit and ask, what was the sense in the NWA as well, with this juggernaut of the WWF at the time expanding and growing and coming into everybody's territory?
Well, it's funny you say that, because it was a real hush-hush thing to start with. And when, the biggest thing in wrestling back then was the AWA. Everybody wanted to be in the AWA because you worked the big towns all over the country. Everybody made good money. Vern really did treat people, I don't know if he treated everybody great, but, you did get good paydays and you were home a lot. It was like the premier territory. Everybody wanted to go there. But when Hulk Hogan did the Rocky movie and he came back, it just popped Vern's territory bigger than ever. And you get guys like Nick Bockwinkel, who did the angles with Vern for so many years and everything, and all of a sudden you got a guy, Hulk Hogan, and Nick Bockwinkel. I mean, it was incredible. So now when you looked at how Hulk Hogan popped that territory, the Junkyard Dog popped the territory down in Louisiana. You had, Ric Flair somewhere, all the top guys in all the territories around. In Dallas, you got the Von Erichs, you got whatever. So now all of a sudden Vince says to his dad, I'm going to take over the world. And Vince's dad says, no, you're not going to do that, because we're not going to do that to the other promoters. And Vince Jr. says, oh, no, I'm going to do that. So what Vince did was he went and he talked to Hulk Hogan. Then he went and talked to the Junkyard Dog, and he talked to all the top guys in these territories. And from what I heard, he went to the promoters and says, I'm going to take your territory. I'll buy your territory, but you're going to get this much money. And Vern says, oh, the hell you are, you ain't taking me over. And Don Owens said that, and Crockett said, all these people. Well, Vince went in and offered these people so much money, he took the top guys from every territory. So all of us guys in the middle are going, what the hell is going on? Because we don't know that this is happening. And I can remember Jim Duggan coming up to me and saying, hey, Barry, has Vince ever talked to you? And I said, no, he hasn't. I said, well, what about it? He goes, he just offered me a big chunk of money. He says, so big, I got to go. So when he took the top guys from every territory and had USA TV, that's what did the whole thing. And Jimmy Superfly Snuka flew off the top of the cage and landed on the guy. Everybody who watched TV went, oh my God, this is what we're going to do. That was the end of all of the territories. That was the start of the end of it. So when the Road Warriors went in there and, the guys after Hulk left, they were just hanging on. It was no longer the AWA territory anymore. there was wrestling going on, but the big thing was New York, and then it was Georgia Championship Wrestling and all that with TBS, you know. So that's when all the territory. But it took years for it to go down. But the talk was, you know, why do we want to go to the AWA anymore? Why do you want to go to Mid South? We want to go to New York, or we want to be on TBS, the big stations.
Very interesting point about Vince, you know, picking everybody's talent. And I remember when it really hit with the AWA, Hulk Hogan and David Schultz, Dr. D, were on top.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, Vince has taken Vern's main event. He took Gene Okerlund. He took everybody up to and including guys that had been AWA mainstays for years and years. And Vince really had no intention of using them in any major capacity outside of maybe like a Krusher in Milwaukee,
Yep.
you know, that kind of thing. So as you said, you know, if Vince's intention was to bleed the territories of anything that they had, man, he sure did it, whether or not he needed the guys or not. It was just the perception, hey, Krusher and Mad Dog are going there too now. The AWA is nothing.
Right. That's when he said he was going to take over the world. That was the only way he could really do it. He took the top guys and killed all the territories. But, you know, that was the vision he had. And when he knew he could get USA TV, he knew that was on all over the country, and he could do that. And if he had the top guys from every territory, then every territory would want to watch their top guys on his TV.
Absolutely.
I mean, it just, you know, no matter what anybody says about Vince is a freaking genius, you know. Mm-hmm. And he's made a lot of mistakes, but he's done so many good things for this business. And, you know, a lot of the guys, you know, they don't like him, you know, they hate him, they do this. But when you think about what he's done, he's changed this business so many times, and now he just sold it for how many billions of dollars? I mean, the guy knows what the hell's going on.
Well,
so Barry,
go ahead,
Mick.
Going back to the first WrestleMania, I wasn't there, but I hear that Vince really at that point was kind of rolling the dice. You know, that this was going to be, he was going all in or nothing. And, you know, and again, whether people like him or not, good God, I mean, what a risky move. He put it all on the table, and now here we are, you know, 35, 40 years later. And like you said, he sold it for what, $9 billion or whatever. So you can't argue with success.
Well, yeah. And then now, instead of WrestleMania one night, they got WrestleMania 2 nights sold out. Now, the next thing you're going to do, they're going to have it 3 nights probably, because they'll have an MAA fight. And then, you know what, it'll be 4 nights because they need 2 for each of them.
Wow.
I mean, it's what a business. I can remember way back when somebody was saying it was a $19 billion year is what was brought in from all the merchandise, all the wrestling, everything. I wonder what it is now, you know?
I think it's an obvious answer. There was nothing that Vern could do. There was nothing anybody could do at that time. Once
it was inevitable.
Yep.
If you're Vern, what I didn't like, and I think this is the most ridiculous thing, if you're in competition with somebody, I don't care if you're a supermarket, a department store, or pro wrestling, you don't talk about the competition. And I remember, you know, even in the NWA, you know, all of a sudden, you know, their catchphrase was "We wrestle." In the AWA, you know, Vern and, you know, Wally would come on television and say, "Don't be fooled by, you know, these guys that are coming in next week. We're the guys that know how to wrestle."
Right.
At that point, that does you no good, except for people, you know, even the casual fan is going to say, "Hey, sour grapes. You know, we know what you're doing here, and we're not buying it."
Right. Yeah, you know, Vern was in a tough situation when he lost his top guys, but he should have made more top guys, and he could have kept the territory going. It should have never even came to the point where the AWA ever went bad. I mean, there's so many wrestlers out there that he could have pushed. They might not have been Hulk Hogan, but they would have been the next step under Hulk Hogan. You know, that could have been a star and could have kept the TVs going. But somehow I think they lost their way in how they started their own territory and made it go. You know what I mean? They were so upset about what Vince was doing, they forgot about what they were doing on their local TVs. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, sure.
It's like when Kurt became their champion. They could have pushed Kurt and or whoever it was, and it would have been just an incredible territory, just like Crockett's territory was, and it was all TV and who the booker was and made it work. That's what makes the whole business. I mean, when you turn a TV on and you go, oh, what the heck just happened there? That's the show you're going to watch. It never happened again, right?
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, I mean,
that's why his territory didn't go.
From a production standpoint, right on down the line, everybody was gone. Vern, of course, he tried to work with some of the other promoters, with whether it was Dallas or, Crockett or Jarrett or whatever. And the story was always, now the promotions are button heads. Now the promotion wants their own guy on top. Is that what your perception was too? That and Vince is watching this happen, and he's counting his money.
They're just cannibalizing each other.
Yep.
Yeah. If each territory would have stayed their territory, they could have had their own WrestleMania against each other, and it would have been huge because it would have been interesting. But instead, they all stayed apart. They all cried and sour grapes, and then they didn't try. It was like, this is the end of us, and maybe they just all ran out of money, or there's so many different things that are involved in it. And the TV people might have said, you know what, we don't want you on TV anymore. But it just seemed like the territory just went away so fast.
Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah, I mean, they actually did try with Super Clash 3.
Yeah.
In December of '88, I was there in Chicago. Going on what you said, Barry, that attempt was unsuccessful because all of the promoters had a dick measuring contest for every single match, but it was too late, I think, by that point for them to do what you said you wanted to do. They should have probably tried to do that maybe in '86 or '87, and I guess they sort of tried. Pro Wrestling USA. The combination, that was a short-lived run. But there again, the promoters got in the way of themselves.
Joe, you're a very wise man.
Well, I appreciate it. I think we're getting ready to wrap up here, and I wanted to leave enough time for this. We've talked... his name's been brought up a lot. Vince, love him or hate him, the guy deserves his credit for turning $1 million gamble on WrestleMania 1 into a $9 billion sale. What was your personal relationship with Vince like?
I really I liked Vince. Vince was, I'm kind of a nice guy. I don't hate anybody. I tell the truth about everything. I don't lie, steal, whatever. I like to work for my money, and he knew that. And I told him when I went up there, and every conversation I ever had with Vince wasn't really business. It was, we were friends in business. He would come up with something to me, and I could actually say to him, Vince, do you mind if I did it this way, or Bill and I did it this way? And he would say, definitely, you do whatever you think was right. You know what I mean? And the conversations that I had with him wasn't about wrestling all the time. It was about my family, his family, and all that. So it was more than just a business for us. And that's where I think I was different than a lot of guys. Everything was business for everybody. And the one thing I always tell people is I was never, Smash outside the ring or Krusher Kruschev. I was Barry Darsow. And that's how I was when I was with him. I was Barry Darsow. And Bill and I, we were just in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we did a couple interviews there. And somebody says, well, how did you guys, last so long? And, you're still on the road doing these signings and everything. I said, because we're Bill and Barry. We're not the Demolition.
Mm-hmm.
We have families. We he was a school teacher. I owned a business. It wasn't wrestling, wasn't our whole life. And that's how it was with Vince. And I think Vince knew that at any time I would just leave. It didn't, if something wasn't right, thanks, Vince, I'm gone. I'll get a job somewhere else. I'll go to Japan. I'll go to WCW, whatever. And he knew that. So that was kind of the relationship we had.
Barry, you're talking about your personal relationship with Vince and how it wasn't always talk about wrestling. It was more on a personal level, which to me is very interesting because when you think about like an AWA roster back in the late 1980s, maybe they had 30 guys on the roster. Vince has all these guys and all these shows, sometimes 2-3 shows a day. So can he, as the owner, develop the kind of a personal relationship that maybe a guy in a smaller territory like the AWA could, where Vern would talk to Kurt Hennig, as the wrestler as opposed to the family man? Were the conditions and the surroundings such that really Vince had too much business, so it was like a pleasure to him to get to know a guy on a personal level?
You're exactly right. Right now, he's probably, he's got quite a few friends, 4 or 5 of the top guys he talks to all the time. But when there'd be a line out his office door waiting for people to talk to him. And a lot of times he would say, hey, get Barry in here. I'd go up to the head of the line. I'd go in and we'd talk. We wouldn't even talk business. And it was because everybody is just on him 24 hours a day. I want this. I need this. Can I do this? And that's what he's running into now. But he has buffers now, Yeah. So he only talks to the people he wants to. But back then he had to talk to everybody. And Bill was the same. Bill and I would go in there and we'd laugh and, do whatever and talk about 2 minutes business. And he loved to talk to us. Mm-hmm. But you're exactly right. He can't have that relationship with everybody. He just can't. So the relationships he had, I think he really enjoyed. It brought him down to another level.
There you go.
He wasn't no longer Vince McMahon. He was one of the guys there for a little bit.
Boy, what a great take on it. It kind of humanized Vince as opposed to, way up on the pedestal, we got the boss in the ivory tower.
Hey, but don't get me wrong. He loved that more than anything.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Right now, the only reason why he's on TV is because he needs to be seen as Vince McMahon. Can you imagine him not being on TV for 2 or 3 years?
No.
It'd kill him. He'd probably die.
Wow.
And with that, Barry, we're going to wrap up part 1. I know there's still a few more things that we want to talk about. There's a lot of really good word association that I know Mick and Joe want to get into, along with a couple of topics that you were talking about, want to follow up. So we're going to break now. We're going to come back. We're going to break it into part 2, and okay. We'll be great. So we'll take a little bit of a break, and then we'll record, and the next one will be aired next week. So we're going to wrap it up here, guys. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, AWA Unleashed on Twitter. Join our fan page. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, you guys. That's the best way. AWA Unleashed on YouTube. I mean, my God, Mick will pay for it. This shit's free. Okay? Mick will pay for it.
Well,
I want to see the cat again.
Don't worry about the cat. The cat will make its appearance several times. I guarantee you. You don't need to play the cat's entrance music or any. Oh, there you go. There it is.
Oh, look at
on cue. On cue. Look at that. Look at that.